edition of World Crisis Radio, and this is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., and in the course of today's show, we'll be giving you a final update concerning the rally that will be held on the west front of the Capitol on October 23rd, Saturday, starting at noon. And when this program goes on, some people in the nearby area, if you're within walking distance, you can come over and observe the goings-on with various speakers, and it's supposed to be a very nice day. So good weather, probably the most important single thing you could have for this. So we've got that. It also happens, and this we'll talk about in the second hour, this week, the time that we're in right now is the 700th anniversary of the beginning of the process leading to the modern state. 700 years ago, the process that created the modern nation state was set in motion. Little-known facts. And what we're talking about is the coming of the Emperor Henry VII, Henry of Luxembourg, to northern Italy and other parts of Italy, attempting to reassert the authority of the Holy Roman Empire on the Italian peninsula, at least the northern part. Although he did not succeed and actually was poisoned, died, was assassinated several years later. This process nevertheless set up the rule of the Visconti family in Milan, and it is from that turning point in world history that we can trace the origins of the modern state, and we'll go through that. And of course, the reason that we know something more about these events is that this is the underlying question in the Divine Comedy by the great poet Dante Alighieri, the founder of modern languages in general, the founder of the modern Italian language, and in some ways the great precursor of the modern state, although he didn't live to see it. By the end of the 1300s, Dante died in 1321, by 1370, 1380 certainly, you have the beginnings, a recognizable prototype of the modern state in the area around Milan, Lombardy, under the leadership of Gian Galeazzo Visconti that we've talked about before. Anyway, this will go into the second hour. So it's a great time. 700 years ago, Henry VII of Luxembourg crossed the Alps and arrived on the 23rd of October, the first day that you can hear this program. He arrived in the northern Italian city of Susa, and that's the beginning. That's from those humble beginnings, those obscure, forgotten, reviled beginnings, because there are a lot of people who don't like this, a lot of Dante critics who don't want to talk about this. But let's look now at the situation with the World Economic Depression. There is a meeting concluding right now of the G20 finance ministers and central bankers in Seoul, South Korea. And this is to prepare the larger meeting of the G20 heads of state, heads of government, which will be the 11th and 12th of November. And, of course, this comes in the midst of the currency war, the process of competitive devaluations, economic warfare, beggar my neighbor policies, and other kinds of chicanery that are being pursued, above all by the U.S. and the British, above all by Tiny Tim Geithner and by Bernanke. And we should remember, Bernanke is now de facto doing what he calls quantitative easing, flooding the system with hot money yet again. Another $1 trillion of hot money is being injected into the system by Helicopter Ben Bernanke. And he got the helicopter, of course, is precisely this, right? Throwing money out of helicopters and having it land on bankers' lawns. That's his idea of dealing with the crisis. So that's what he's doing now. So Helicopter Ben is flooding the system in the U.S. with $1 trillion of hot money. And that money will all go overseas. It will all become part of a dollar carry trade, which will flee to high-interest emerging markets, above all Southeast Asia, South Asia, and so forth. And that's causing mayhem because as the U.S. dollar goes down, right, as this money leaves the U.S., that means people are selling dollars and buying something else. Those other currencies go up, the U.S. dollar goes down, bad enough that the U.S. goes down, but when the U.S. goes down, China goes down with it because China has decided to maintain a fixed parity, a peg between the renminbi, the people's dollar, the yuan, and the U.S. dollar. So that means that when the U.S. goes down, and the U.S. does still have some residual exports, although not a lot, that also adds in China, the world's biggest exporter, fastest growing economy, and overall economic success story. So that is then undercutting Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, all kinds of other countries that are getting hit and hurt by the low price of the Chinese currency. Now, the answer to that is if you don't like the current currency ratings, then you should join the fixed parity club. And remember, the U.S. Constitution says that Congress has the power to coin money and to regulate the value thereof. The Congress has the power to fix the value of money. How interesting. Not the free market. This is now, it seems to me, a direct contradiction to the fantastic mythical ideologies of the free market. We'll get the exact quote from the Constitution here in a minute. We'll cite you the article and the clause. But if Congress has the power to coin money and to regulate the value thereof, the fruition of that was the Bretton Woods system, fixed parities. The government and governments tell the markets, meaning finance oligarchs who dominate them, what the currency will be worth. They're told what the acceptable band of fluctuation is, and if you try to drive the currency above the band or below, then you get slammed because then you can get raided, right? If a bear, they'll come in and bear raid you, and otherwise the trap for the longs and so forth, and you basically punish people severely who are trying to tamper with the value of your currency, whether that's George Soros or whoever it is. So that's the background, right? We did have a successful fixed parity system from 1944 until almost 1971 when it did begin to break up and proved it was impossible to bring it back. The big exception, by the way, was always Canada. Canada kept by the British as a kind of showcase example of a floating rate currency because the British have never liked the idea of fixed parities. They became addicted to competitive devaluations in the 1930s under Ramsay MacDonald, and they've never wanted to go back to the tyranny, they would say, of a fixed parity grid. And you can see this in plenty of examples, even in regard to the European snake of the 70s and 80s. Anyway, the G20 finance ministers in Korea. Now, the immediate background is some very, very interesting stuff. Here we have TheStreet.com, and TheStreet.com is alarmed in their article that more and more countries are mulling capital controls. In other words, capital controls, exchange controls, are ways to prevent large flows of hot money from rushing into your currency or out. If they rush in, the currency is driven up and your export industries are destroyed. If the hot money rushes out, then you can have a panic in your banks, you can have tremendous austerity, you can have to go to the International Monetary Fund, and so forth. The essence of globalization is that these hot money speculators rule the world. More and more countries are saying no to Soros, no to the other hot money speculators. And we'll be back in a minute.